I guess we should just dive in. Yeah, so we were talking about the relationship to materiality and spiritual paths. So it is something, I think the original question is something happening in recent generations that is just a step beyond what is desired on an individual level than in previous generations. Like previous generations forming this basically material security was enough.
I think that
And religion as a social function. So go ahead.
I think that a big symbol of this that we need to think about is the pyramids in Egypt, right? Because what this physically represents is an organized effort by a group of people to make something that has lasted thousands of years, right? And it wasn't until we started to get like in a system that allowed us to cooperate with each other in a grander scale that allowed us to make society, to make religion, to make the world what it is today. Like when we think of ourselves on our own, like there's only so much we can accomplish, but when we put the entire kingdom together through a religious ideal, we can create pyramids. And that's just 4,000 years ago with limited technology, right? Like now we have smartphones, we have like rockets that are going into space. We have like, and all of these things are just because a bunch of people put their minds together, right? Like in reality, it's a natural tendency, I think, for us to try to create like some things that that will last a long time and go beyond us to help our future generations, right? Or to give them the awareness that there's more to just being alone. There's more to life than just being alone, right?
And religion was an important step along that path. I'm seeing people more open to different spiritual ideas and not feeling like they have to be the religion of their fathers, of their community, what have you. And we're so much more connected than we were, and we're exposed to so many more ideas. You can find so much on the internet. Books are way more widely available than they were 100 years ago. So I think that though that necessary step of religion and material security in society to a certain extent was a necessary step, but do we see something different happening in recent generations? Is that more blocks on top of the pyramid? Is that kind of what we're seeing where it's the next phase up the pyramid?
Yes. I would say yes because, like, I don't know, maybe it's the people I talk to specifically, and I've put myself out there as, I don't know, kind of a guru, I guess, for a while, and a lot of the people I've talked to have sought me out, or I've sought them out, or we've connected through, like, similar social spheres, and a lot of the people I talk to are on a path to reach, like, a value system that like puts immaterial desires like joy and security, like emotional security and like your internal idea and self-image of yourself, like on to as the priority rather than trying to focus on what you can physically give to the people around you. And I think that this is important because, like, if we're only thinking about how we can provide for each other with materiality, then we are losing out on the majority of what we actually have to offer. Like, would you rather, have some super nasty food that's made with chemicals that, like, a bunch of people put together because it's cheap? Or would you rather have something that somebody made for you in the kitchen because they love you or because you have a mutual connection with them, and then that brings you more emotional reward, I believe, than, just eating some preserved chemically food, right? So,
Yeah, I think that we're at a bigger advantage of taking advantage of the human potentiality in a way that we weren't, a previous generation. And we're starting to really address things that, whether it be depression, understanding how we think. And psychology itself is actually a really like very new science, 70 years old. As far as sciences go, that is brand new. But we're starting to address the more subtler aspects of being human. And in those subtler aspects is the spiritual potential. That spiritual potential is, you could say a step beyond psychology, but we're addressing issues on a more subtle level. And then we're starting to realize how much there is down there, how much there is within ourselves, how much energy does affect things. Like you mentioned, making food. So like in India, culturally, there's this thing where somebody who's angry won't make food because that anger will go into the food and you consume that anger and that anger becomes part of you. And there's been there's been some recent scientific studies and experiments that show, for instance, like the pain an animal feels when it dies, that biochemistry actually does translate into our own biochemistry when it's consumed. And it does so we're starting to realize certain things that were kind of considered superstitions are starting to actually have some biochemical substance. That's just one example, but that's the example I'd give that's most to this point. But does that make sense? We're starting to become more and more subtle in how we address things, and we're starting to
Yeah,
realize
yeah.
how much there is there.
Or like the common what's it, adage, the hit knock on wood if you say something that you don't want to actually happen, right? Like for my experience, that's always been and like not about the physical world, but it's about your mentality and what you think about. And like if you like don't do the superstitious thing, then you'll like be more worried about that thing happening, and could cause it to happen, or you to act in a way that makes it more likely as a result, rather than just like, forgetting about it and doing the thing that's good for you. Like,
Yeah, so like a lot of it's a useful structure, and I feel like we're realizing like so a lot of the time, a lot of let's say like religious superstition, a lot of people are like forced into doing certain things. Now now that we're not as forced, at least in the United States, we're starting to realize the good side and the bad side, and leaving the bad side of forcing people to do something, and just like if you want to do that, you can, which is a
uh,
huge step on the pyramid, if we want to use that example.
I feel like we're actually getting to a point where we're trying to hold other people accountable for our religious values as a legal, like, through the legal system. Because, like, the reason that abortion was legalized is because the women have the right to control what happens to their bodies. If they're pregnant and they could choose to throw themselves down a flight of stairs to kill that baby inside of them, that's their right. They have their own brain, they have their own body, they can choose to do that. And it doesn't matter how anyone else feels about it, because it's them as a person making that decision. But we, as like a society, we need to give these people the opportunity to help themselves without having to hurt themselves in the process. And with the abortion clinics we have today, that's very possible. But it's because of religious values that are overwhelming common sense that's allowing people to make that illegal. Because why would we force people to basically be slaves to the state as baby makers if we
Yeah,
weren't
and
fucking using
and there's
religion?
definitely, I totally agree with you. It's it doesn't even make sense on a logical level because when you make abortion illegal, it turns out abortion actually goes up when you don't give them options in clinics or like give them even assistance. And abortion levels always go up, and what happens is mothers' deaths actually go up a lot. So I mean, it's one of those things where it's gonna happen anyway. But at the same, and there is that body sovereignty, right? Where it's like you can't if a life form is inside somebody and it's reliant upon that person, and it's in that person's body and it's reliant upon that person, it's basically a part of that person's body, and they get to choose what to do with it. If it can't live separate from that person, that it is a part of that person. So I'm a fan of body sovereignty, obviously. I don't know if that's the correct term. I think that's the correct term. Yeah, probably.
Self-sovereignty, probably, but yeah, I
Yeah,
get
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, for
I
sure.
believe that we've been losing the ability to self-govern with time. Like I think that materialism has been making us like forget that we are our own individuals who control our own bodies, and society doesn't get to influence how we make our decisions. Like, and it's not religion that should be taken into account for that either. This is what I think. This is my critical thoughts. This is like what value do people have for like thinking this thing versus that thing? How can I be my own original perspective in the mix? How can I help us grow as a species? Like this is where I believe a lot of like people were at before, and like now we're reaching a point where we're like more rank and file organized, like just listening to what a talking head or like a big group of people tells us is the right thing, and then we're like just going along with the flow and forgetting to put our hands in the sand and fucking do some thinking before we get back up and fall.
Well,
Like,
we're dealing with mass media in a way we've never dealt with it before, and there's going to be some blowback because the just the level of messaging or what somebody's message wants to be can be shown to you in so many different ways that it couldn't in the past. So there's going to be a downside to this technological exponential growth or the singularity, if you want to talk about AI. But like But there's going to be a bad side to all this, everybody being connected. That means that whoever controls the way people are connected can get their message out there to a bigger degree. And then that's why media literacy needs to be more of a priority. And we don't, and it's hard to say like the government or a particular organization should teach media literacy because they're going to bias it in their favor. So we're dealing with this. We need to figure out at an individual level how to increase our media literacy, how to read things based on the biases of the sources that it's coming from. And that's something that I think people are figuring out. Some people are going in a really weird direction to where they're believing like only the really out there and weird stuff that is actually detrimental to their mental health. And they're
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
and their literacy is going in the wrong direction. Whereas I think a lot of people are their media literacy is increasing to in degree of quality. But
One
that's
thing,
why you see the splinters because it's something that we as a species have not had to deal with before.
one thing about the spiritual path is that you are always looking for a center, like, position, right? You're always trying to, like, create a new thought from the extremes, or like trying to, like, you know, create unity where there's divisiveness.
Are we
And
talking about Hegelian dialectics? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Is
well,
that what we're
in
talking
a
about?
way, but like it's just we live in a world where when there's people who choose to adopt extreme polar opposite values, and there's no one in the middle ground to help them resolve or reconcile their conflict, then it causes a driving force in society to split it up. And if you don't like have people who are representing the middle values that everybody believes in and everybody wants to have happen rather than just just the things that like each side stands on as a platform, right? Then you have a lot of issues, right? There becomes like conflict in like just regular day to day life, and there's not as much a way for you all to unite and represent similar or common goals, which is where how the pyramids were built in the first place, right? Now we're going backwards. It feels like to me through materialism. Like,
I think that we're having hiccups because we've never dealt with some of these things before. I mean, because like once again, there's two sides to the connection, but the extremes always seem more prominent and they're always more popular as far as like content, as far as absorption, because they tie into alarmist emotions, and those are the ones that most easily get people attached to a story, get people attached to an idea, and those are the people that scream the loudest. When I do feel like most people are like in between, in the middle, in the gray zone, and they're not the one. The vast majority of people are not going to scream about it because we got other things to like. We're not the ones screaming. So it does seem like the extremes tend to be on the soapboxes because they want to climb up there and they want to yell it at you. So I think it seems worse than it is, and I think that a lot of it is that as a species because I mean the way that we evolved is we see things with our eyes and they feel like they're close when they're right in front of us. But now that so many things can be close right in front of us on our screens and from so many different places and so many different sources, our brains are struggling to try to figure out how real these dangers are because our brains have never done this quite like this before. And there's so many things that can trigger our emotions right in front of our faces on a minute to minute basis. So I think it does have a physical evolution side and it has a spiritual evolution side, and we have to learn to mitigate. We have to learn to kind of mitigate all this, and it needs to, I think, be more, at least more a part of the discussion for sure.
so one of the things I think is a big issue is the apocalypticism and of eschatology, right? Like people who eschatology is like what religion believes about the end of the world or if there will be an end of the world, and apocalypticism is obviously like people thinking the world's going to end. So I think that people who do not see the intrinsic nature of reality where things will go on forever, like if we think of the end of the world as when the sun explodes using scientific data, then that's millions of years away. And the way that our species has evolved in the past 100 years alone, if we keep that same rate up, we'll be on another solar system within the 10,000 years from now. It's not realistic to think about our world ending, period. Like no matter what religion you look at it from, there is no such thing as an end to our world. We as a species might die out. But that's not going to kill our world. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the way that we think about these things is wrong, and we are religiously indoctrinated, I believe, to think about things in a way that makes us like separate from each other, right? Like, because if you believe in the world never ending and you believe that there's enough for everyone, if you believe there's like good things in the world, then you're going to want to unite with other people to experience those things together. But if you think that the world's going to end and that, people are going to bring about the end of the world and blah, 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 then you're going to hate each other. You're going to like think that other people are the problem. You're going to think that, it's normal to be separate and your own person and not relate to anyone because maybe that would bring about the end of the world, right? Like you don't want to worry, you don't want to start that process. But at the same time, all that from my perspective, all we can do is grow past the faults and the flaws of our past, and us all relating about what is our ideal and where we want to go with our species as a whole is what creates heaven for us instead of putting some kind of post-apocalyptic society in our future.
You went into ideas of time there, so I think it is a very religious thing to have like a beginning and an end point. But when you look at paganism or Hinduism, these things are cycles. Like it's not going to end. Like literally, even if we ended or this world ended, there are billions of intelligent life forms in other parts of this universe alone, this one universe in Hinduism. But even in pagan understanding, even in Norse understanding, Ragnarok is not the end of all things. It is the end of this cycle, and then something else is going to happen. But I think that religious figures, and specifically Abrahamic religious, then they tend to make up most of the world population.
So that's like what, 2 billion people out of the 7 billion on Earth or more?
Yeah, I think it's so Christianity, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all Abrahamic. And
Yep.
I think there's 2 billion Christians and there's 1.8 billion Muslims. But they are very loud. But all the Abrahamic religions are fairly recent. Their dominance is also fairly recent compared to other religions, and they're not cyclical. They're not as connected to nature in their application, and as far as how the Bible is put together and by who, by Constantine. And Constantine killed 40,000 Christians in I think Constantinople. Yeah, he killed 40,000 Christians for believing in reincarnation, and that was part of making sure that all Christians. So the root of the word Catholic is kathos. I think it's Greek, so it means universal, making everybody's point of view universal. So universal might sound good, and there's a good universal. The bad universal is making everybody believe the exact same thing. And people who formed modern religions did that to control people. And they definitely had a timeline in their heads of things might end soon, things are going to end soon. So you better listen to us, otherwise you're not going to be saved and you'll go to hell forever. And then those ideas have been pushed in a huge way that Jesus didn't even talk about that much at all. Like it's been so edited so many different times. I do not think
I
that.
think it's mainly just like a ideology that's pushed by a warring species, right? Like, through Christianity, I'm not saying we, but like probably my ancestors, we probably expanded from like Rome, and then using the sword is where we made our religion secure, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm Christian because I'm not, but like what I'm trying to relate to is we as a species, as humans, when we are Christian in our values and we like go to a place that's not Christian, we used to send missionaries and stuff like that to convert people. And then we typically would replace their leadership with a Christian leader. And then everyone else becomes Christian because of that. Yeah.
Or convert them. Like in the case of the Norse, like it was converting like the Norse and Northern European peoples. It was very soft power, except in the Baltic, but it was very soft power. It became very hard power when we look at imperialism, Christian imperialism going further west. But so there's so much of it that I want to label as religion and religion being bad. There's some of it of just how it's been used has been used by very greedy people. And I don't think that those people are indicative of our species. I think that they are indicative of power, and that's why that's why they were able to spread their message and enforce their rules. But I don't think that they're indicative of human beings. I think because we're not in a constant state of war. War and conflict seem like the rule because they're the things that stick out on the canvas. But the canvas of human beings, we're not fighting every day. We're not fighting minute to minute. We're not killing each other minute to minute. This is the contrast between what we see and the truth of humanity. And we don't walk out. We've never just walked out every day and gotten into a fight with a neighboring tribe. Like that wasn't the majority of our history. But those are the things that stick out, and those are the things that power wants to talk about because power, that's how it got more of itself, is through conflict. So that's what power wants to assert. That's the doctrine that power wants to make the nature of humanity.
That makes sense because like the seeking power and requires you to overcome conflicts, and then that makes you more powerful. And I was literally just thinking about like Israel and Hamas and how like they're both like not even representatives of their peoples. They're just like these military like warring tribes that are like a small group of the percentage of the whole for each group. And they're the ones making the decisions for the rest of the majority that's causing millions, like tens of thousands of people to die that like when they didn't even get a choice. They're just involved because they're part of like the same population, the same ethnicity, right?
Yeah, and no matter what conflict it is, I'm always on the side of like the civilian. You know what I mean? Because like, yeah. I mean, I hate the IDF and I hate Hamas, but I mean like Palestinians I'm fine with and Israelis I'm fine with, and you know I just and that's going into a whole other thing. I wish that they didn't keep them in Palestine, that they would let them leave, but they keep them there and bomb them. So it's like they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice to even get out. They won't even let them out. Yeah. So it's just a microcosm of the problems of power. And
well, the way I see it is this is literally like the public eye is getting put on something that has been a norm for how we've treated each other for the last 100 years since World War I. You know, like how they are treating fucking the Palestinian people and the fighting the war is like how America has treated every other country that we've ever fought ever. Like the only reason we won against Vietnam is because they like did scare tactics and what's the guerrilla tactics, right?
In Vietnam.
That's what I'm saying. The only reason we didn't win in Vietnam was because they were using guerrilla tactics and stuff. But every other country where we've gone, we've basically just decimated people and like replaced them with our leaders.
And that gets into another, and this is more of something that I want to explore than I have strong opinions on, is that I don't feel like most Americans would have done what, I don't feel like if you put the majority of Americans at any point in American history and you put them in that position of those war crimes, I don't think that they would have done them. I don't, and so I wonder where the us is, because and us, U.S., that was an unintentional pun, but like I wonder where the us is, because power has the means, and power is a small number of hands, and then controlling troops, getting propaganda into their minds, and commanders telling certain things that are funneled from the top. But I don't even think that most American soldiers would commit war crimes. I think that power finds ways to accomplish itself. So when I think of us, I used to think of myself as an American. I used to identify. I mean, I'm still American, but I don't feel like the us that did all these things. And I don't think that most Americans do either. But then at the same time, we've allowed that power structure to exist, and we've allowed that power structure to continue as it has, basically in the same form. So how much of the onus is on the American people who actually wouldn't even do those crimes? So it's a complicated situation, I think, and it's one.
Well, I think one thing they do as a strategy in the military is they'll like not tell you like what exactly you're doing. They'll just say, hey, do this specific thing at this specific place, and then we're going to drop you off there or something, and then you don't know how it's impacting the greater situation of the world, or you don't know exactly what's going on. You're just being told like, there's the enemy, go kill him, basically. And that's all the information you need to know. So, and like that's part of the reason why they like break down your like ego and stuff in boot camp training with drill sergeants, right? Is so that you won't question what they tell you. It's like a personality diminishing like process.
Do you
And
think the
like
reason why we like superhero movies in the United States so much is that the propaganda from the U.S. military and the Pentagon for so long has made it seem like we're the superheroes, and we want to believe it so much that we want to believe in superheroes? But deep down we know that that's not how things work, but we wish that it did subconsciously. I'm not sure, but we seem to love superhero movies in the United States, and
I think I think it's
like
because
over proportionally.
I think we've all been oppressed by our government for so long. We wish superheroes existed so they could liberate us from the fucking people that are like using their power, putting us under their thumb. Like, the war on drugs, for example. Like, every country, like in the 1800s, had free legal drugs for every single substance, basically. And it's only with the event of medicine and where they discovered like how these drugs were affecting people badly that they started to put an outlaw on them. But that basically just meant that like people's freedoms were being limited without their like ability to give a say to it for like the ongoing future after that. Like, so you're
In
telling
the
me
war
that
on
like,
drugs, there's so much tie-in between capitalism and socialism, and like there's so as far as the narrative goes, and yet the war on drugs is used to oppress minority communities. The more I think that we kind of agree on all this, the more that I think eventually I studied so much history that at heart I'm an anarcho-primitivist. Like I got to a point I've studied history like obsessively for a good, I would say 17, maybe 14 years. And I learned enough at some point where it's like, shit, I don't know if I believe in government anymore. Like I think people got there by studying less history, a lot of people, but it took me a while to get there because I was like, fuck, these power structures are awful. They're terrible. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think it's because we have always been in a place where we've needed to maintain military control in order to like protect our society, essentially. But like, that's one of the things about connection that I think we're getting to. I think we're getting to a point where it's more of an economic thing, more of a like inter person to person relations thing. Like, we're so connected that like we would actually genuinely feel bad if our friend from another country that we're at war with died. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to, as citizens, kill other citizens from other countries that we have personal relationships with. And that's where our unity is coming from. I believe like that's where our spiritual growth is really like impacting us, is that we're becoming so connected that our previous power structures are no longer sufficient to like keep things in check. Like, we as an average citizen know more about what's going on in other countries sometimes than our own like intelligence agencies do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's funny is that and I feel like so the intelligence agencies are monitoring like everything, but I feel like we're not as policed as we think we are. Um, there's just there's not enough people, and at the same time, this a philosopher made this point, a modern philosopher. Um, if you Y theory, this philosopher is on. I can't remember his name, but Y theory is the podcast. But he said, I bet if I gave he said everybody's so worried about the NSA, but I guarantee you, if I gave like an NSA, an average NSA agent, like Phenomenology of Spirit by Hegel, he wouldn't know if it was right side up or upside down. Like I don't think that they're inherently stronger and more intelligent than us. They're drawn from the same population. So while I think that they are like inhibiting our rights and infringing upon our rights in a big way, they just simply don't have the manpower or intelligence to do it in the ways that people are afraid of. And I don't say that in order to be like, don't worry about it. That's not what I'm saying. But don't feel like they're superheroes. Like they're not. They're the same assholes that we are. And I feel like we need to fight against a little bit of the paranoia and have a little bit of realism with the awareness of the infringements of rights. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my thing though is like, how do I put this? Like, overall, like the state has always been trying to take as many freedoms from people as possible and regulate them, because that's what creates like tax money, basically. Like, the more you can tell somebody this is what they can do and this is what they can't do, the more you can tax the things they can't do, right? And the more we let the state control our lives, the less freedoms we have, the more like tax revenue they take from us, and we basically become slaves instead of being free people.
Yeah,
Like
we're
that's,
wage slave. We're definitely wage slaves to corporations and tax slaves to the government. But when you know what, it's crazy because when you look at how we've kind of developed, we've kind of agreed upon a governmental structure and just subconsciously, and then that agreement just carries to the next generation, and it carries from generation to generation. And you know, a strategist made this like really great point. The deep state does exist, but it's not a group of people. It is a culture. The deep state is a culture, a continuous culture that has carried from imperialism and colonialism. There was no break. It is continued.
well,
And when that bureaucracy and culture gets formed, you don't need individuals. It is a culture that is carried from person to person. And it's not like one person, it's not a group of people. What makes it scarier and harder to take down is that it is a governmental culture, and that makes it a little bit scarier, honestly, because it's not just a few people that you would need to destroy. You need to destroy the entire mindset and the culture of the bureaucracy.
well, yeah. So as I heard recently that, people who are like in big businesses that are like CEOs, for example, that have been there for a long time, they know what their like desires are from other CEOs in similar positions without even needing to talk to each other. Like they're already have the similar experience, so they're already have similar goals, and they can like there doesn't need to be a conspiracy for them to like represent each other's interests. They just do it naturally because that's where they're already at on their own path, right? So my biggest like a thing that I've been working on and trying to like see happen is we need to like influence these people's lives one on one, like where they can't ignore us. Like most of the like look at Jeff Bezos or not Jeff Bezos, but Mark Zuckerberg. He lived his pictures of his room before he like got big or like while he was in the process of getting big. He was literally like in a 1 bedroom apartment with a fucking mattress on the floor and like never talked to anybody, right? Like he was always doing his work. Like that's where these people are like so absorbed in whatever it is that they're doing, whatever they're creating, that they don't really pay attention to people outside of them. And we need to make them pay attention to the people
So we
outside of
need
them.
connections at all levels of society because
Yes.
because based on who you are, I don't think that you're saying that we need to capture Zuckerberg and like sit him
No.
down in time. Now, I think you're saying that we need communication on all levels. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, but like in a sense where it can't be ignored. Like, as in, like, I could like walk up to somebody who's like this big famous person and be like, what do you think about this specific issue? And instead of him being like, oh, I don't want to make a comment because it'll hurt my image, it'll be like, oh, this is my belief and this is my opinion. You know what I mean? Because having
Well,
everyone
maybe we need to
represent
replace the
themselves.
culture with that kind of culture. So maybe we need to work on replacing the culture of isolation and shutdown with the culture of communication.
Yes, I agree. I
For
think
sure.
that'll
And
allow us to
just to
grow.
let you know, Skype it gets buggy after 30 minutes. So should we wrap up on a few thoughts or we
Well,
good where
yeah,
we're
well,
at?
we started doing the whole like intro, right? Or like where we're coming from. So let's finish off with where we're going, right? What we're working on is being more spiritual. We're working on being less influenced by the material world and being more influenced by what feels right. Now, I don't want to say what feels good because that can be like a two-way street, but what feels right allows like and what feels like it'll be right for the most people with hurting the least amount of people, right? That's where we're really going with spirituality. That's the reason we're not using an organized, systemized religion, because if we were, we would be stuck with the same results that people have been getting for hundreds of years. Instead, we're working on creating new systems which can help us feel good and help other people feel good without anyone else getting hurt in the process. The focus on immaterial gain rather than material gain is helping us help other people see the world in a better light rather than just them being stuck in like this is only material and there's nothing more beyond that, right?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it's like people are captured by nihilistic materialism. They don't really know it. But I think that more and more people are waking up to the fact that we are more than that. And I think there's an inherent nature to every single human being that knows that there's something deeper and more, but that we put up these walls in order to function in a materialistic either society, but also just either in function in relation to government, in relation to corporations. We put up these walls around our inherent nature, and I think that those walls are being tested and brought down more and more. I'm actually an optimist for the direction we're going. I think that the hiccups that we're hitting are the death throes these death throes might last a while, but the death throes of materialism, and we're seeing it spike because it gets very dramatic, but right before materialism dies, it would be very dramatic. So I think I have an optimistic view of the future, and I have an optimistic view of the inherent spirituality of people and their ability and their willingness to realize it in the coming days and in recent days.
So what we're doing is we're transitioning from being a consumer economy to being a creator economy, right? Like we're literally transitioning from I'm just going to absorb all these stuff that other people make and I'm going to make my own things. Where that way other people can enjoy the things I make and I can enjoy the things they make. And that way we are all producing in our society rather than just taking away, right? And that's, I think, where we really need to get to is being a group of creators who create more creators rather than people who are consumers and then create more consumerism.
I can back that for sure, man. Yeah, I guess we can end it there, stop the recording. But yeah, thank you all for watching. If you watched this long, let us know in the comment section on either one of our channels. And like this video. It really helps out both our channels get traffic to videos like this so we can talk to each other more and make more connections. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the future.